we're just go ahead with.
That's fine. Good afternoon. Welcome to Senate Education on Tuesday, April 5th, 1:34 p.m. We're going to spend the first hour or so on returning to H727, our walkthrough. Then we're going to pick up, if memory serves me correctly, with Colin Robinson, who is going to come in to talk to us about an idea for the teacher shortage. And I met this morning, teacher workforce shortage, with the chair of economic development. I think we're going to take whatever we do and actually attach it to miscellaneous education. The House Workforce Development Bill, they're concerned they may not be able to get that over or get it all worked out. So we'll, just so you know, that's where we're going to probably land on that. And then we're going to do a final walkthrough, or close to a final walkthrough, on page 517, National Guard Tuition Benefit Program, and then wrap up with PCB testing in schools. I have been in contact with the chair of appropriations, and we are just trying to settle a little bit today. I don't know how helpful they're going to be or not on this issue immediately, but try to get some dollar amount there. You know, what would it look like to start to address this? How much should be set aside, etc. But with that, Ms. St. James, page 727.
Thank you, Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel. I believe we left off on page 71 of chunk 1, which is the named rewrite. Chunk 1. Does that sound right to
Yes,
everyone?
exactly. Yep. Line 13.
So the next section would be line 14, section 731. What happens if there's a vacancy on a unified union school district board? This is a mix of current law. It's actually all current law, and it is a mix of Green Book and session law.
Okay.
So filling a vacancy in a school board seat is addressed in current law in chapter 11 and 706L for Larry. So that concept exists in current law. In the proportional to town population model, remember that's a seat that is tied to a specific town. And the modified at large model, which is on page 72, which is again a seat that's tied to a specific town. There is session law that's on the books right now, that's set to expire and get sunset this year, that is different than what's in the Green Books under current chapter 11. And so this draft reflects the session law. So if there's a vacancy in a proportional to town population, a district that uses proportional to town population for a seat, for the modified at large, so page 71, starting on line 19 through line 15. For both of those options, the way the seat is filled is that the district clerk, so the clerk of the school district, notifies the select board of the town with the vacant seat attached to it, not later than 5 days after learning of the vacancy. And then within 30 days after providing notice and after consultation with the select board, the Unified Union School District Board itself appoints an eligible person to fill the vacant seat until a successor is elected at an annual or special meeting. So that is what is currently reflected in session law. I believe it went into session law for the first time in 2017. And then there was
Act 46.
No, it was not in Act 46. The most, I don't know where it originally appeared in 2017, but currently it was in the 2020 Big Bill is where that language was inserted.
Okay.
The current law, the Green Book law in chapter 11 says that the select board actually appoints the person.
Oh, that's
Right.
why there's a difference.
There's a difference there. So this has the school board
Unified.
consulting, the Unified Union School District Board consulting with the select board, but the Unified Union School District Board making the appointment itself.
And that wasn't a policies, sorry, Chair.
No, please.
that wasn't a policy decision that they talked about, whether we would want the select board or the unified school board to make those appointments?
Do you know an answer to this, Senator Chin?
I do. So when I presented on the miscellaneous bill, the one senator, it's not senator, House rep was actually asking for an amendment to do just this, and the committee voted unanimously to not accept it as a part of the amendment. So
Oh, it was going to be a floor amendment
yeah,
to change that it would be the select board. Yeah. So I remember that.
I mean, to steal your thunder.
Nope,
They
that's
had a,
accurate.
Okay.
So this, because session law is law, right? And this provision had been re-upped for several years at this point. The draft that came over from AOE included the language before you today, which is current session law, having just a consultation with the select board, with the school board making the appointment.
It's in our lines.
what is the value of having a select board make a decision for the school? Because, I mean, they're so separate.
Because they're representing the town. It's a town representative on the unified board. So the select board is representing the town.
Town specific.
So the unified board picking somebody from the town.
Okay,
The reason
Yeah,
it came up
that-
before is like,
yeah.
if you're a town that wants to not be part of a forced
Yeah.
merger
Yeah,
and there's an opening, the people on the unified board might pick somebody that is supportive of the merger, but the
Right.
town might not be supportive, so the select board might appoint somebody different than the board would. That's why people wanted to
and
change.
so the AOE is put in that the district board,
They could solve with the select board, but they could
are
decide.
we gonna change this or leave it?
What would you like to do?
I'm ambivalent right now, so I'm sort of thinking, hey, you know, I'm,
We're gonna hear, from you might just hold the question for
Yeah, yeah.
AOE when they're coming in, I think Friday, with other witnesses, and that would be a good time to try to pull it apart with that group.
Where is that, like,
72, I think.
It's page 71, lines, starts on page 71, 19 through 21, and then 1 through 6 on page 72, and then again, it's the same concept repeated in
Yep.
lines 7 through 15 on line 72. And that's only if the school board seat is tied to a particular town. You'll see later on page 72 in subdivision 3, for at-large representation, it's just the school board filling the vacancy because those seats are not tied to a specific town. And that's again consistent with current chapter 11. So it's slightly confusing because the session law is current law. It's set to expire this year. Historically, prior to 2017, what is currently in the green books in chapter 11 is what happened, and that was the select board.
Has this been utilized? Do we know if this has been?
I believe it's session law in direct response to a particular issue,
Yeah.
but I don't know.
There was
the
something
particular
down in
issue.
Mill River, actually.
yeah,
Is that right?
definitely happened.
Yeah, yeah. And can I just ask for a clarification between proportional and modified at large?
So modified at large is a hybrid between, does the hybrid answer everything?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
go ahead, continue, yeah.
Sure, so it's a hybrid between the proportional to town representation model and the at-large representation model, where the seat is tied to a specific town, but everyone in the district votes on
Votes
it.
on it, okay. And, but that is the same process for modified at large as it is for proportional now for this.
For filling a vacancy, correct, because the seat is tied to the
Yeah.
town. Moving on to page 73. If there is,
Everybody here, except for me, served on a select board or school board. You as well.
I have-
City council.
No.
but-
City
I've been on.
It's great.
select-
You still on this?
Yeah.
He's on the
council? Yeah,
And Terenzini is also, I think, on the select board.
yeah, I was on the Board of Aldermen a long time.
Decisions.
page 73, vacancy in all seats. If all seats are vacant, then the Secretary of State will call a special election. Let's see. If within 10 days after the appointment of a board member, the district clerk of the Unified Union School District transmits the name of the appointed board member to the Secretary of State. What happens if there's a vacancy and they have obligations or they need some money? There are vacancies in the majority, so we're on page 73 at line 8. If there are vacancies in a majority of the members of the school district board, then the remaining member or members are authorized to draw orders for payment of continuing obligations and necessary expenses until a majority of the vacancies are filled. And if there's a vacancy in all seats, then the Secretary of State shall authorize the district clerk or other qualified person to draw orders for payment of continuing obligation and necessary expenses. That is all current law. Page 74, section 732, Unified Union School District Budget Preparation and Authorization. Look at my notes here. So the language in this section is mostly current law, kind of cobbled together from various different areas of the law so that it is in one central location, so that someone who is looking for information on a school district budget can find it here for a Unified Union School District. So I will point out anything that's new. The board of the Unified Union School District prepares and distributes the proposed budget annually. That's current law. If the voters do not approve the board's proposed budget, then they shall prepare and present a revised proposed budget. Again, this is mainly a reference to election law. So that's what Title 17 is, the local elections. If the voters do not, so here's a little bit of a policy decision if you have that policy document handy. So I'm on line 9. If the voters do not approve a budget on or before June 30th of any year, then the board of the Unified Union School District may borrow funds pursuant to the authority granted under section 566, which is in Title 16, and that is the school district's authority to borrow. The following sentence, so that's current law. The first sentence is just current law. The second sentence was added by AOE in their initial draft to address an issue that arose in UUSD mergers. And so that sentence reads, as used in section 566, the most recently approved school budget of a union school district in its first fiscal year of full operations means the cumulative budget amount of the most recently approved school budget of all districts that merged to form the union district. If you stop before the highlighting, that sentence was added by AOE to address issues that came up in the mergers, right? If you're looking at what's the most recently approved budget, but you're a brand new school district, you don't have a most recently approved budget. So you use the amalgamation of all of the school district budgets to count as your most recently used budget. House Education made a decision to also add 1% on top of that.
Which was derived from.
Why 1%?
Yeah.
So it was policy decision. You will see the AOE suggestion here on page 4, middle of the page.
Page 4.
No,
Oh,
that's,
sorry,
I
of the
don't,
policy document.
Oh.
I don't have stuff on the website.
Potential policy considerations.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So if you jump to page 4. There's not much to it. It was just a suggestion by AOE to consider replacing the default budget with the default budget plus 1%, and AOE adopted that.
That's okay. It's wrong. So I gotta add my.
That's a little practical joke.
No, it's not.
I have one here.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Is it listed today, Daphne?
It is.
Every daytime?
Yeah.
Oh, it's on today.
So this was added by the House, a suggestion by AOE.
Correct.
And in order to do what exactly? What, you know, there's
So intent is beyond my
Yeah.
area of expertise.
Mhm.
What the 1% does is just gives the school district, if they don't approve a budget, it gives them even larger cushion for
Yeah.
what they can use while they're trying to get a
Trying to get
budget
a budget
approved.
addressed. Okay. We can ask them, but
Mhm.
sounds like they had some reasoning for it, given the situation that you mentioned. Okay. Thank you.
Annual report data. So I'm on page 74. Are we okay to keep going?
Please.
Okay. Line 17, Unified Union School District, again, this is already required in current law. Here's an annual report concerning the affairs of the district, and has that printed and distributed to the voters. And the board has to file it with the district clerk and the town clerk of each town within the district. And then the Unified Union School District shall provide the Secretary of Education answers to statistical inquiries that may be addressed to the district by the secretary. Again, that's current law. Moving on, we're on page 75. We are now on line 9, section 735, officers, election, term, vacancy, and bond. At an annual meeting of the school district, the voters shall elect a moderator from among the registered voters of the district. The voters also shall elect a clerk of the district and a treasurer of the district. And then again, this was a policy choice, the same policy choice we saw when we were looking at mergers. In those initial elections, that the voters may vote to authorize the school board to actually appoint the clerk or the treasurer rather than have them be elected.
So this is something that we've already covered in the earlier section.
Mhm.
Just
This is the same thing.
Same
the
thing.
exact same thing.
Yep.
Thank you.
This is all essentially the same thing as we have covered in formation.
Okay.
Same thing, the voters can extend the length of the terms of these positions up to 3
Right.
years as a new addition. Vacancy, again, this is all current law. If there's a vacancy in any office, the Union School District will fill it, and the appointee serves until the remainder of the unexpired term.
Are you on 80?
I'm on 77.
77, sorry.
Yep.
Some language that I have on 83, I have a question, sorry.
Oath
Go
of
ahead.
office, an officer elected has to be sworn in before entering the duties.
Okay,
The district shall ensure that a blanket bond, I believe you're going to be taking testimony on this section later this week, or the subdivision, so line 7 through 9. Notification, the clerk of the Union District transmits the name of anyone elected to the Secretary of State. All current law. Officers, powers, duties, and liabilities. So that's how we get the officers into office, and now they're in office. What does the moderator do? What does the clerk do? What does the treasurer do? Their powers, duties, and liabilities are the same as those of the same position in a town school district. There's nothing different just because it's a unified union school district. All current law. Do you want to go over that any more closely?
looking, I don't see any.
Let's see. Page, so on page 78, section 737, warnings of a unified union school district meeting. Again, this is mostly current law with a little bit of detail added to again provide clarity. So the board of a unified union school district has the same authority and obligation to warn or call meetings of the district as a town school board has to warn or call school district meetings. So the district clerk is the one responsible for providing, except in subsection F, which we'll get to. But for the majority, the district clerk is responsible for warning the meeting. And that person does that by posting a warning signed by the chair of the board, specifying date, time, and location, and at least one public place in each town within the district. Again, all current law.
Senator Hooker, do you have a question?
Nope,
Okay.
I was looking for the in each town.
Yep, in each town within the unified union school district. and a newspaper circulating in the Unified Union School District. In the district clerk's absence, the chair of the board or the chair's designee warrants the meeting. So it's a lot, that's a lot of work. So that's why it's very clear who's responsible for all of that work. This on page 79, lines 3 through 8, so subsection C was added in the original proposal from the Agency of Education. I believe this was added specifically as a recommendation by the Secretary of State's office, this level of detail. And that is that the warning shall by separate articles specifically indicate the business to be transacted to include the offices and questions upon which the electorate shall vote. And the warning shall also contain any articles or articles requested by a petition signed by at least 5% of the voters of the district and filed with the district clerk.
Senator Chinman.
So I suffered through it's on YouTube. I was on the South Burlington City Council during the Rebel debate, and this language seems to strike me. There was a strong push where they got a petition, they signed to ask the voters whether or not to keep the Rebel name. This just seems wide open that any article that the voters want to put before the school district, including mascots, could in fact be on the ballot. Would you interpret that the same way?
The warning shall also contain any articles or articles requested by a petition. Yes.
So when we get the same,
Senator Chinman, do you have a follow-up on that?
Okay, so that doesn't necessarily mean that the school board has to act upon the article voted.
So the way this is written,
Because the school board decided to decline the petition. The school board had the authority to say, you know what, we're not going to put that on the ballot.
yes, and I read the case that came out of that, and there is some, yes. So I think there is some leeway depending on what it is the petition is asking for, and it depends on whether or not it's something the voters could vote on to begin with. So in the South Burlington case, there was an interpretation that the changing of the mascot was not something that could be left up to the voters. It was within the school district's province.
Yeah, please.
This just seems like very absolute language that if that were to come about again, I could see constituents reading this saying, you got to put this on the ballot. And I don't know if that means anything, but.
Yeah, and is Senator Chinman's interpretation accurate?
I agree with you that this is, having read the South Burlington case and knowing that tiny little piece of
Yes.
election law and reading this now, yes, I agree that seems pretty black and white. I am not an expert on election law, and this seems to have been a recommendation from the Secretary of State's office. So I would suggest this is a great thing to flag for when they come in to discuss with them.
Good.
But Senator Chittenden is right. That was an interesting, it ended with some interesting case law. And there is case law out there about what
Voters have a right.
what voters have a right to vote on when it comes to school district government. Shall we keep going?
Please.
So the warning setting, the posted notice that accompanies the warning has to include information on voter registration, early and absentee voting, time and location in which the ballots will be counted, and any other applicable information. That is another detail added. I believe it's consistent with election law, but it's not specifically currently contained in Chapter 11. The warning shall be recorded in the office of the district clerk before posting. That's current law. So in subsection F, this subsection applies if a unified union school district elects school board members under the proportional to town population model. So that's a seat tied to a specific town, and only those towns' voters are voting on that seat. If it elects those members by a floor vote rather than an Australian ballot. So the warning will be different. So the district clerk transmits the signed warning to each town clerk. So now we've got town clerks involved. Previously, what we just talked about that applies to every other situation than this it was the district clerk doing all of the warning work.
Mhm.
Now we're passing on some responsibility to the town clerk in this situation. We're on page 80, line 1. The district clerk shall assist each town clerk to incorporate the warning into the warning for the annual or special meeting of each town. The town clerk, rather than the district clerk, posts and publishes the warning. And notwithstanding any provision of law to the contrary, if any town within the Unified Union School District elects its select board members by Australian ballot, then the warning, nomination, ballot preparation, and election of Unified Union School District board members shall proceed pursuant to the same laws that govern that town. Does that make sense? Okay. If an annual town meeting at which the board members are elected under the subsection is more than 30 days prior to the annual meeting of the Unified Union School District, then the newly elected board member shall assume office at the conclusion of the district's annual meeting. So that is just in a proportional to town population model when that school district operates by a floor vote. Very specific situation. Notwithstanding, so I'm on line 15 on page 80, notwithstanding any provision to the contrary, a Unified Union School District shall warn a meeting for the purpose of considering a bond issue and shall warn a meeting to consider a revised proposed budget. And that is current law, those two provisions.
Yes, on our agenda.
So I should know this, but have we adjusted the language to, as we go forward out of this pandemic, to allow for virtual participation for floor votes going forward?
That's not addressed here, and I wouldn't be able to comment on any of the changes that are happening to Title 17.
The Secretary of State's office should-
Absolutely.
on Friday.
Mhm.
Here. Okay, thanks.
So we're on the very bottom of page 80, line 21, section 738, checklist for union district meetings. I'm sorry, am I encroaching on space here? Okay.
I am. Stuff over, so I don't want to get into.
Refuse to give up paper, so
It hurt.
I'm not helping anything here. The checklist for union district meetings where voting is conducted from the floor. So a union district is made up of a whole bunch of different towns. How are you sure that everyone who's showing up to that meeting can vote in that meeting? Page 81, not later than the close of business on the day before an annual or special meeting of a Unified Union School District. The town clerk of each town within the district shall furnish to the district clerk at the expense of the district authenticated copies of the checklist of legal voters within the town as the checklist appears after revisions are made.
Senator Persley.
Same day voter registration.
No, I was wondering what authenticated copies means.
So this is a reference to the registration of, authenticated copies. Let's see.
Line 5.
Yep, so this is a reference to registration of voters in Title 17, and let me see if there's,
I can ask that.
it might, if it's spelled out in this reference to Title 17.
I have a question on this as well.
Yeah, please.
So I'm glad we're gonna have Secretary of State's in, because I'm curious if this language is completely consistent with what I understand to be the permissibility of city voter registration. That if this is gonna somehow have a different standard for those living in a school district to have been registered prior to showing up for the floor vote.
Were you saying that that's what this statute references?
I'm looking it up right now. So it's the registration of voters subchapter. So says after revisions are made pursuant to, and this is the registration of voters subchapter in the qualification and registration of voters chapter in the elections title. And there are several sections incorporated here. And I don't know them off, I don't know them intimately to know if within there is same day voter registration. I can, between today and tomorrow, look that up, and if I'm not able to come back with a definitive answer, then that's a great question
Yeah,
for.
Senator Chitty.
I just look forward to grilling Jim Condos and Chris Winter, so.
I think you're gonna get Will Senning.
No.
He's in charge of elections division.
But he is the director of elections. I will note that.
The posted notice talks about all of this
Yep.
voter information.
Correct.
So it would seem as if it would be consistent with other types of.
I agree. I would hate to start a sentence with I assume in front of you all, so I'm going to look that up, but I totally agree. Page 81, line 9, someone from the town's Board of Civil Authority, a member of the town's Board of Civil Authority shall assist the district clerk to determine voter eligibility. And again, this does not apply if we're doing that proportional to town population floor vote. Conduct a vote if by Australian ballot, page 81. This is mostly based on language in the current chapter 11, current law, that applies to voting for bonds and just kind of extrapolated out for other voting process. So for any vote that proceeds by Australian ballot and it's a unified union school district, a district voter shall vote by Australian ballot in the town in which the voter currently resides at the polling location identified in the warning. The voting shall occur in each town on the same day. The Board of Civil Authority shall be responsible for determining the eligibility of persons to vote and for supervising voting at that polling location. And the opportunity for early and absentee voting shall be provided. That's for Australian ballot. But
That's different.
it's different, but it's contemplated here. So I'm going to confirm that it was contemplated in the last section. And this is current law that I just. The preparation and form of the Australian ballot, again, we're still on page 82. The clerk of the Unified Union School District prepares the ballot. If it's by Australian ballot, only questions warned by the UUSD and presented to the voters of the district shall appear on the ballot. Warned questions of the UUSD shall not appear on the same ballot as questions warned by the legislative body of the town of the Unified Union School District. Counting. So section 741, line 16, page 82, establishes that commingling before counting is the default.
Mandatory or default? Sorry.
Default. So we'll see what default means as we keep going. At least 2 members, the Board of Civil, I'm on line 18 through 82, at least 2 members of the Board of Civil Authority of each town within the Unified Union School District, or 2 election officials appointed by the Board of Civil Authority of that town shall transport ballots cast in that town in a sealed container to a central location designated by the district clerk. The district clerk shall place the ballots from all locations in a single container.
I feel like I'm talking.
Yeah, please.
I feel like I'm talking too much, but this
Yeah.
is also very definitive language, and I'm not against this. If this is how CVU and MMU does it, it's just, I know that there's alternative ways where you wouldn't have to transport the ballots to one central processing location, also forcing a separation of the school questions onto a whole separate piece of paper. This seems rather absolute with shall transport ballots.
I agree.
All right, but the Secretary of State will come in and we'll talk to them.
Do you want me to keep going?
Please.
Page 83, line 3. So the boards of civil authority shall not count ballots for purposes of determining the outcome of the votes prior to transporting them, but they may open the containers and count the total number of ballots cast at the polling location. The district clerk or designee shall supervise representatives of the Board of Civil Authority to count ballots at the central location. And then the highlighted language, lines 11 through 13 on page 83 was a policy consideration that House Education adopted.
I have a question on
Yeah,
that one.
please.
So my question is that the clerk, district clerk can appoint unified school district board members. Now, so usually when we go in to help out as a BCA, we take an oath, kind of an elections oath. And I'm wondering if that's another question for the Secretary of State, maybe? Is there an oath that they're given? So that they don't undermine the democratic process?
Good question.
I've just noted that. I will,
You could appoint all your best friends.
Senator Chambers.
So I don't know if I made this really clear with the discussion the other day, but in South Burlington, we have 4 districts and the school questions are on the same ballot. So what we run them through the machines and then we know how different districts in South Burlington voted on the school. But this language tells me you can't do that. You have to have a separate school ballot and those school ballots aren't run in all the different towns. Instead, they are,
But it's with each town within a unified school district.
so they're put in
Still.
cars. So I'm guessing these ballots from each location are put in cars and brought to a central location and then run through at like 8, 9, 10, 11 PM at night. I just think there's an alternative way where we could allow the school ballots to go through each of the town machines and then they consolidate. I'm not advocating for it.
No, I just have a question. It's actually a question about, it says each town within a unified union school district. So South Burlington is a town. So it's each, so it doesn't matter.
It's not a unified school.
Not a unified school
yeah,
district.
that would be my question.
Yeah,
That's why. you can
so
do
far
it.
yeah, South Burlington is not.
You see my
affected.
point though.
Yeah.
We would
Yeah,
say
no, I
paper-
understand completely what you're saying. You're right.
Paper
Right.
time and
Why
there's
would you
also
say? Oh, yeah.
Right now,
Yeah, you got too many
forced it
ballots.
to have a separate school ballot.
Right, that's what we're doing.
And you're burning fossil fuels, shoving ballots all over the place
Yeah.
at the end of a really long day.
Time for you to get on that fossil fuel train.
Well, you could put the ballots in the boiler, keep it cool.
We digress. Ms. St. James.
I do think that's an important distinction
Yeah,
though. If
thank you.
South Burlington School District is a town school district, that's different than a unified union school district. But the Secretary of State's office would be in the best position to work through all those different scenarios with you.
So MMU would follow this.
Correct,
Yeah.
a unified union school
Yeah.
district.
And this is already in law.
Not
Not,
the appointment, not the extra people from the board.
Okay.
And I think the concept of commingling is currently in election law, but having it be the default here is not.
okay, Senator Chambers. I'm
As,
sorry, Senator Hooker, did that answer your
Yeah.
question? Okay, Senator.
as this conversation goes forward with SOS, Secretary of State's, I'm not advocating that we have to do it the other way. I do see merit in giving towns the choice because there are savings. I know that our town clerk is very frugal, and when we've tried to tack on warnings onto an already worn primary ballot, we save $10,000. So I can see school districts save money by not having to
Yeah.
run a separate piece of paper and all those trees.
Ms. St. James, did this go to government ops in the House?
They had a very quick drive-by, and the most
I can see why
helpful,
they would want it. Yeah,
the most helpful information they got was not from me, it was from the Director of Elections.
okay. Yeah, no, I just want to give Senator White a heads up that this is something that we'll need to carve out some time.
Go over it word by word.
Exactly. I want you to read it. Yes, Senator Birchwood.
Could the district clerk appoint folks to help with the counting that aren't on the unified
Good
school
luck.
district board? They have to be, this makes it look like only if they're board members.
Yeah, so there's 2 options. There's the representatives of the boards of civil authority. And then there's the board members, the school district board members who are not on the ballot that the district clerk has the authority to appoint.
Okay, because the board of civil authority already has the authority.
Correct. I believe they're the people who are, they're the ones who are driving those ballots over.
Waste me on, they could be elected time.
If I may.
Yeah, Senator James,
So
please.
I also, we all know January 6th and the questions about voting integrity, and I just don't like the idea of putting a bunch of ballots in volunteers' cars, driving all over a county
Yeah.
to a district. So I just think
Yeah.
there's merit in exploring it all.
Yeah, we should
I
look
think
at
you're
it.
right. I think it's worth looking at, and I think we need Jeanette's, that committee's sort of, I think, final okay, but I think you're absolutely right.
It
In
also-
fact, you might even start just thinking about that. I'm sure you are, Ms. St. James, potential amendments as we move forward. Senator Hooker.
Begs the question, what is the purpose of the commingling?
Right.
So, just to not point fingers at particular towns.
It's, right, people feel pretty strong about it, but maybe that's not more, like, it is what it is, like, there's some towns always voting against it, why does it matter?
Hmm.
But I know, in other districts, people feel strong about, oh my God, you can't count them separately, you have to be commingled, so we
Right.
don't know which
Yeah,
town.
so we don't know which town is.
But I don't-
and which town.
I can't think off the top of my head what the downfall would
Of what, of point of
be,
stopping.
of knowing, it's like, oh wow.
Right,
You know, Bennington always goes to town.
right,
like,
right. It seems almost kind of a right to know sort of thing, yes, I understand.
Well,
So-
yeah,
So really, it's helpful to know how district, because there are personalities within our 4 districts. We know one district usually votes this way and another district another way.
Right.
And I don't see that as a bad thing. I think that is helpful for trying to pass budgets and knowing
Yeah.
what market. And a right to know piece.
Yeah.
I have made a note and
you.
will,
In
Yeah.
this last, we had a tech center vote and there were 16. And so they were like, oh my God,
It's-
16
Yeah.
different schools that feed students to the tech center.
Uh-huh,
So, but they wanted them all to come and commingle them, but then it was like COVID concerns about
Yeah.
everybody showing up in one location. And there was something in the law that said if all the different schools agreed to not commingle, they could. But I didn't see that in here, but maybe that's, I don't know if that was just a special thing for the tech center. But they didn't have enough time to go to all 16 schools and get each school board or select board to vote to not commingle, so they had to do it, but I didn't see anything in here about electing not to.
kind of addressed on page 84. I do want to go right there.
yeah,
Okay. There's one other kind of new to the law that I want to point out on page 83, so I'll have to go back there, but there's an applicability subsection to this statute, it's on page 84. So the counting of Australian ballots for election of board members, election of district officers, proposed budgets, and any other public questions proceeds pursuant to this provision, so commingling, except if a Vermont statute explicitly permits or requires a different method of presenting the type of question to the voters. The proportional to town population model that we talked about earlier. Or if the articles of agreement as initially approved by the voters on or July 1, 2019, explicitly provide that the Board of Civil Authority of each town shall count Australian ballots cast in that town and report the town's results to the district clerk. We shall calculate total votes cast within the Unified Union School District and report the results to of the vote to the public. So if it was specifically in the original, the articles of agreement as initially approved by the voters, to do otherwise.
This tells me somebody's thought about this before.
Yeah.
back to 83.
Back to 83, I just want to point out line 14 through 15. This is something that came in the original AOE. It's new to law and it is in the original AOE draft and then carried through to passage through the House. But it was supported by the Secretary of State's office. I don't know whether they advanced the idea, but I know they supported it. And that is to allow 24 hours for votes to be ballots to be counted after the polls have closed. And I believe that was in an effort to address concerns about driving late at night in the winter, or trying to get everything to a central location if there were dangerous driving conditions.
So it's, yeah, and we can pull this apart with the Secretary of State's office, but is this, so what if it's not? I mean, that must be something already in law, you know.
I believe this is new,
This is-
brand new.
Okay, so it's sort of, it's aspirational, do this within 24 hours,
Right, as soon as possible, but
As
not
soon-
later than 24 hours.
or,
I assume, I don't know, I just said that I wouldn't want to start in a sentence, but I assume, but at least I caught myself. I am not,
we can pull it apart with
Yeah.
Secretary of State's office.
They get a nasty grant.
but it would be the same as not counting the ballots if that provision wasn't there.
Yeah,
I could,
yeah,
I could see a legal challenge basically trying to discount the entire vote.
Right.
Mhm.
it's a good point,
Good
yeah,
enough.
yeah,
I will, I'm sure that it is, I'm not an election law
Sure.
attorney, and
Yeah.
it's not my subject
Yeah.
matter expertise, so if I can find an answer for you by tomorrow,
that would be great,
great, and if
but if
not,
not, that's fine, yeah.
Nothing against Will Sending, but I'd love to see winters and condos in here.
Sitting in the hot seat, absolutely. Yeah, live.
They were my former employer, so I came from SOS.
Oh, you did?
And business surgery.
No, I came from OPR,
Oh.
That's
Little OPR.
little OPR,
Good old OPR, yeah.
depends on what license you were seeking.
Yeah.
I was the head of I was prosecuting folks, so no one liked me.
Oh.
So,
tattoos without a license.
correct.
Yeah,
Um,
Marshfield. I've read the stories. Please, go ahead.
okay, so, we went through the applicability section. Page 84, commingling and reporting of all votes cast by Australian ballot and from the floor. So again, this language, we're on top of page 85, is very clear. Votes cast by the voters of a unified union school district shall be commingled, whether cast by Australian ballot or from the floor. The district clerk reports the commingled results. Commingling and reporting of votes cast by voters shall proceed pursuant to the provisions of the section regardless of whether the votes proceeded by Australian ballot or by a floor vote, except when, again, with the same carve-outs, Vermont statute explicitly permits or requires a different method. The ballots have been cast to elect a district board member under the proportional to town population model, or the articles of agreement specifically say otherwise. Page 86, bond issues. This is, this is great timing. So bond issues, this is current law. A unified union school district may make improvements as defined by the municipal and county government indebtedness definitions. That's what that 24 VSA 1751 is referring to, and may incur indebtedness for improvements. The debt limit of the unified union school district shall be 10 times the total of the education grand lists of the town within the unified union school district. The existing indebtedness of a union school district incurred to finance any project of this title should not be considered part of the indebtedness of the unified union school district for purposes of determining its debt for a new proposed bond issue. I will point out that the state aid for capital construction has been paused for quite some time, all in session law. You have no way of knowing that if you just went to the green books. I flagged this in the House, and there wasn't really anything done with it. I don't think you necessarily need to do anything with this because there has been no repeal of these statutes for the state aid for capital construction program. But I just wanted to point out that the program has been paused for several years. And then bond issues are determined by Australian ballot. So current law. Greatest news is that I think we just finished chunk 1. If you are comfortable with the following. So subchapter 4 is Union Elementary School Districts and Union High School Districts. It starts on line 21 of 86 going through page 87. And that goes all the way to page 113. And it is exactly the same as what we just went over, except it applies to Union Elementary and Union High School districts.
Okay.
So there are some differences because instead of member towns, we have member districts. And then we have those interesting places where there's no member district left over. So what do you do there? But the concept
Is all the same.
is all the same.
Is everyone comfortable with going right to page 113 then?
Okay.
And what my hope is, once we finish with this, at any moment now, we'll break for 5 minutes, return to committee to take up other things, and then tomorrow we'll have you back to do the big part, which is the withdrawals. Tomorrow afternoon, also, we're hearing from some school board members regarding a particular section in this bill that you actually flagged as you were going through. Bonds.
Yep.
Yeah. So I may have you also just come back tomorrow and tee that up for us, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. 113.
Page 113. So this is based on current law. but updated to reflect all that has happened since the sixties.
Mhm.
So each union school district in existence on July 1, 2022, so that's the effective date of this bill. If it is passed and if the effective date changes, we would want to look at that date. Is ratified and subject to the provisions of this chapter, regardless of whether the district was formed by a vote of the electorate or the state board created it. So it doesn't, once this law takes effect, it doesn't matter if you were voter created in 1972 or the state board created you pursuant to Act 46 in 2018. All of these laws are deemed to apply to you.
Which is pretty standard, I mean, this is
Yes, yep.
standard stuff.
Yes,
Yeah,
just again, just kind of
clarifying
Yes.
and
So references of this chapter to articles of agreement initially adopted by the voters also means articles of agreement is issued by the state board as part of the order. And I believe Donna sent sample articles,
She
state
did.
board articles to the committee. So articles of agreement in effect on June 30th, 2022 is initially adopted by the voters. They'll govern the school district unless and until amended. Provided, however, notwithstanding the provisions of other laws to the contrary, the provisions of this chapter 11 shall govern in all matters not addressed in the articles of agreement and shall take precedence in the event of conflict with any article. And then the secretary, section 764 on page 114 requires that there be documentary evidence of the creation of each union school district so that it can be found in one location in case it's not already there. So it requires the Secretary of Education to forward to the Secretary of State copies of the certifications designating the existence of each new union school district created pursuant to the state board's final decision. The Secretary records the certification and the Secretary of State files a copy of the recorded certification, any amendments with the elected clerk of each union school district created by the order. So that would happen naturally if there was a vote. There wasn't a vote on a state created union school district. So this is just requiring the same documentation to exist so that it's all of the union school districts are consistent in their documentation of existence. And that is the first chapter.
Certified copy of the certification.
Mhm.
The certification is,
Not certified.
The certification is the document, and then the document would be a certified copy of.
Certified certification.
Yes, sure.
certification. But then
Are you okay with
certified, like,
that?
Thank you so much.
Sure.
The big, even though it's not as lengthy, tomorrow we're starting at 1, we're going an hour and a half into the withdrawals. And that's where it gets a little meatier and in some ways more exciting. We have a number of people coming in on Friday. Also, towns in particular will start coming in and tomorrow will give us context for those conversations.
Yeah.
This wasn't the exciting part.
I will say, there's also
Yeah,
the session law, which
right.
is also, I think we've seen a lot of interest. And so what we're gonna start with tomorrow is Trump 2, which is withdrawals happening once the law is passed. And then the session law is addressing withdrawals that are currently underway today. So straddling the lines.
But all of that is in chunk 2, correct?
No,
there's a
chunk
chunk 3,
2, so chunk 2 is
little known chunk.
Yeah.
Chunk two is the withdrawal statutes that would fit in the middle of
That's right.
this rewrite.
Yeah.
That would apply if this bill passes and is signed by the governor.
Mhm.
And someone wants to withdraw on July 1.
Mhm.
But there are a number of situations where withdrawal is underway, so it's straddling old law. Well, it's not straddling anything right now. There's just current law.
We got an email from Stowe.
Right. They're coming in on Friday to talk about this.
That's addressed in the
They're
session
They're
law.
the strategy.
That's chunk 3.
Their strength 3.
That's chunk 3.
Okay.
which they seem happy with. They just wanted to tell us that.
Yeah.
Oh, glad
Okay.
they didn't do this.
They do have any.
They're gonna-
Let's come back